I released a video showing what I felt was the problem with time signatures, and while I showed what the issue was, I missed a major part of the explanation. What is the difference between meter and time signature? And if you, like me, thought they were the same thing, well, you're in for a musical awakening. It is clearly evident that showing the difference between time signature and meter is important based on this exchange on my other video. It's dumb to think of YYZ in a 787834 progression? Well, several people gave him the thumbs up, but why did I suggest feeling it this way? The meter and time signature are different. Even without that explanation, I had several people thank me for pointing out the pattern and it made more sense to them. And this person that commented came around to my understanding after I explained it a little bit better. I will take it one step further though, the opening track to Total Recall. This is clearly in 4/4, right? There's a little syncopation in the second bar, but the composer would definitely write this in 4/4. It would be idiotic to write it in 4/4-3/8-5/8, right? Well, enter Jerry Goldsmith. And I honestly was not expecting this when seeing the score, but for the exact same reason this makes sense, so does the 787834 pattern in YYZ. Maybe even more so there because of the Morse code connection. And to prove this is not a one-off incident, here's Adventures on Earth from E.T. That's in 3, right? Well, if I played it at the end, you would be correct, but this section trades off 4/4 and 2/4. The meter, however, is in 3, and this section is typically conducted that way. So, alright, let's get to it. What is the difference between the two? Well, a time signature is a way of structuring the notes into what should be the most logical way to organize the music to make it easiest to read. Typically, this means finding the most common division of the measures, so if there seems to be one very strong implied beat every 4 beats, well, it's probably in 4/4. What if there are 3 beats and the third beat is slightly longer? Well, that fits 7/8 notes per measure, so that would be 7/8 time. And it's here that we get our difference. Is there a piece in 7/8 time that you would conduct in 7 beats? I'm personally not aware of any, but can list a large handful that you would conduct in 3. It's this 3-beat pattern that is the meter of the piece. The meter is a recurring beat pattern. So, is it possible for meter to match the time signature? Well, of course. But this is not a universal truth, and it is my belief that we need to understand both the time signature, what I'll say how to read the piece, and the meter, or how to play or feel it. So let's take a look at some examples of music with meter not matching the time signature to explain my point. Since I know I'm mostly alone in this argument, I'm going to show as many different types of examples as I can to prove this concept. First, let's prove further about feeling the meter over the time signature. In my other video, I talked about the 5/4 clave, and if you ask anyone to sing the Mission Impossible theme, how many people actually think 5 beats? 1, 2, 3, da, da, I highly doubt you think of it other than ba 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 be ga da ba ba ba. Another example is the big drum transition in the song In the Air Tonight. I highly doubt anyone is actually thinking what drum hit is on what beat of the time signature, but definitely feels the beat pattern of that fill instead. So let's go to some easier examples to grasp. This comes down to how a piece will be conducted. An easy classical example I've seen conducted in 2 different ways is the second movement to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, a frequent example that I use. This is in 3/4, but is conducted in 1. The meter of the music emphasizes this, and the tempo would be dragged down if you thought of it in 3. The other way I've seen this conducted is in 4, following the hypermeter. Still 1 beat per bar, but the conductor follows a typical 4-beat pattern. Hypermeter is where there is a large structure to the music. It doesn't necessarily follow the same meter as the music being played and is typically just a single number. Here's what the hypermeter would look like for this movement of Beethoven 9. Hypermeter doesn't have to be a looping pattern of numbers. You could actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, For instance, if the music seems to repeat measures. This example is in the intro to Brahms' Second Symphony. You could even take this down to the beats of the music for analysis. Take the dinosaur theme from Jurassic Park. There's a 6/4 measure in there, but beats 5 and 6 are really just another beats 3 and 4. The theme to Terra Nova does the same thing. Now that we've seen that we can feel the meter over the time signature and how we actually already use it, let's look at some more complex pieces that the time signature and meter change all the time. So Profanation by Bernstein is a perfect candidate. Here's the beginning, and I'll show you the time signature. See if you can follow along. Now I'll show you the beat pattern, aka the meter, instead. Let's see if it's easier to follow. This is one of those pieces where musicians will write a line or a triangle on their music to show, you guessed it, the meter, just because the time signature doesn't say enough, which is, well, the problem with time signatures. It's taught that 7/8 could be grouped by 2/2/3, 2/3/2, and 3/2/2, but just by looking at the time signature, how do you know which one it is? And yes, 2/2/3 is the most common, but 3/2/2 is the meter of YYZ, as well as the Klingon theme from Star Trek. But what about when the meter alternates between two of those, like the theme to Ant-Man? The time signature is not going to help you out. I also want to point out that the Ant-Man was probably conducted in 2/2/3 throughout just because the musicians were late at the end of every other bar in some sections because they were waiting for that third beat and reacting off of it. Had the conductor shown the correct meter and the musicians felt the correct meter, the timing would have been more accurate. How about a piece that is written in 4/4 but is crazy to conduct it or think of it that way? Well, the Blue Lake Overture by John Barnes Chance is the perfect example. When I first played this piece, the conductor made it clear that he was not going to conduct it in 4, but to just follow the music and what he will beat will make sense. Sure enough, after the initial shock of the weirdness, the ensemble had no problem playing the piece. Why? Because we were following the meter and ignoring the time signature. This piece should not be written in 4/4 and is honestly made harder being written that way. Ghost Love score by Nightwish is another perfect case study. Here's the opening sequence. Now feel free to listen to that multiple times and figure out what time signature you would give it. No one should have a single time signature, but for me, I hear a pattern of 6/8/3/4, 6/8/3/4, 6/8/2/4, 6/8/3/4 from our standard uses of those time signatures and their meter. While there are no notes to clearly define the second measure, it still fits the pattern of the rest of the sequence, so it makes sense to me. But I can understand that some might say it's still in 6/8 since there isn't anything in this bar to signal 3/4. But did anyone say that first measure was 3/4? I'm honestly willing to bet that no one did. The meter is far too strong on the standard 6/8 that 3/4 wouldn't come to mind. Yet here's how they actually count off the piece when they're doing it live. So the time signature they follow are 6/8, 6/8, 5/8, 6/8. or 6/4 to match the quarter notes for my analysis. And yeah, to me that doesn't make any sense, especially with how the music transitions into the next section, the final 3/4 just becoming another 6/8, which in their version there would be 4 beats to their 6/4 measure. So their time signature can make sense, but the meter tells a completely different story. So is it possible to have different meters happening at once? Absolutely. And this is where time signatures actually come in handy in keeping everyone together. The trick is which meters the conductor going to go with, and most likely what the time signature is, which you might be shocked to know might be different than the melody. The main theme for the Pirates of the Caribbean movies is an example of this. The theme is in 12/8, but the melody is in 3, giving 6 beats per measure. But the conductor and the percussion will be in 4. The proof of this is in the intro, clearly in 12/8, and then the melody kicks in. But everything stays the same, and the melody sounds like it's in a fast 3, which explains why some transcriptions of the melody look like this. What we need to remember is that the meter of the music can change while the time signature stays the same. The Burly Brawl from the second Matrix movie does this perfectly. The 3-beat pattern of 2 dotted quarters followed by a quarter is hammered in hard for some of these measures throughout the piece, but there are standard 4/4 measures in there too. Let's take a listen. Another example of this is when the music goes into halftime or when you feel the beat slow down by half. The song Stronger by Through Fire does this perfectly. While on the song, and yes, it's in 4/4, but there's a pattern in the intro here that gives a different meter.
So, talk to daddy, talk to daddy. He will rock you when you are sad. He isn't.
What about the opposite? Can the meter stay the same while the time signature changes? Absolutely, this is in the theme to Star Wars. During the opening titles, that theme is in 2/2. At the start of the credits, it's in 12/8. And when that theme comes back shortly after, now it's in 4/4. That time signature changed, but the meter stayed exactly the same. This also proves that just because it has a triplet feel doesn't mean an 8 is in the denominator. This does beg the question, do time signatures matter to composers and songwriters? Personally, I'd say no. They hear the music in their head and then just write it out. While writing Whipping Post, they didn't know that it was a unique meter and time signature. They just played what was in their head. And the main theme for How to Train Your Dragon is in 4/4, even though the meter would suggest 12/8. So what does this all mean? It means we need to take our heads out of the time signature and actually play the music instead. Yes, the meter can change every bar, but that's okay. That's what gives the music life. We end up taking out this life when we just read the time signature and ignore the meter. But of course, when we teach that the top number in a time signature is how many beats in a bar, most musicians will then never fully learn and appreciate what the meter actually is.